My own development is probably just as appropriate to talk about here as anything on these tapes, because I often think to myself that if I can do it coming from where I came from, that anybody can. I come from impoverished beginnings, a child who never had an allowance in his life, didn't even know what it was. When other kids would talk about my allowance, I didn't know anything about that because there just wasn't anybody there to give me an allowance. The people that were there didn't have it to give away anyway. So it was very, very early in my own development that I learned the secrets of being my own person and my own strengths. I can remember just as a young boy being in classrooms and having teachers yelling at us and trying to get all of us to feel guilty and to feel upset and to feel angry because as a class we were misbehaving in some way or another. And I can remember one teacher just screaming at us. She's never had such a bad experience, and this is the worst class she's ever had. And I can remember sitting there thinking, this is the worst that you've ever had? I mean, your life must be really easy if this is the worst you've ever had. And my friends would come up to me, and girls in the class and people, you know, that I knew that were in the class would all be all upset over what this teacher had said. And I can remember just as a young kid, I mean, we're talking about the first and second grade now, I can remember saying, she's just doing that to control you. She's just doing that to get you, you don't have to be upset. You don't have to be hurt. You don't have to be unhappy. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be any of those things. That's just what she's using to try to get you to be what she thinks that you should be. And it works most of the time. And I can remember saying that to my friends, that somehow within me, when I showed up on this planet, I believe that I had a mission. I had something that a lot of my friends didn't have, and that was an inner knowingness that no one could decide what my emotions were going to be or what my life was going to be like or how I was going to feel about something. That internal kind of knowingness isn't something I believe that I learned somewhere along the line through some magical, instantaneous kind of revelation. It was something that I believe I showed up with here, and that I think that every single person has that capacity for, but they don't seem to choose it. And it's like knowing that you have that inner strength, and knowing that nobody else can make you unhappy, and knowing that no circumstance out there is too big for you to handle, and knowing that when you go off to sleep at night, no matter what has happened all day long, that you still only have yourself to live with, and that very private inner world wherein you talk to yourself, and we call this self-talk or whatever you want to call it. All of us do this all the time. We have these conversations with ourselves, which is really two people. We are having a conversation with ourselves, and we do this all the time. And what the quality of those conversations are, how you process the daily events of your life and all of the things that are happening to you, is really the secret source of enormous strength. And then, as you get a little older, you begin to put a label on that. You begin to identify that in some way as something that is more than just an intuitive way of processing the world in a positive direction. It's more than that. You begin to realize that you're not alone. And a lot of people believe that they are alone in the world, and that this inner world of thought and this inner world of power and of inner conviction, or whatever you want to call it, is something that you can rely on, but it's not just something that you're alone with. And as I got older and more experienced in it, I began to see that that I believe I have someone with me, or guides with me, or some kind of help available to me at all times. And it's just really a question of whether you decide to believe it or don't believe it. It isn't anything we can put to a double-blind study and have scientists come up and say, no, this doesn't exist or that doesn't exist. It's just a knowing. And when you have that guide, and almost all of the great spiritual masters and the great religions and so on, when you begin to study them, as I have done in more recent years in my life, and written books about them and produced tapes about them, you begin to discover that the greatest thinkers, the great contributors, all have this sort of inner knowing that they're not alone, that help is available to you. Help in the form of whatever you want to call it isn't even relevant. If you want to call it God, or you want to call it Buddha, or you want to call it Christ, or you want to call it spirituality or consciousness or whatever, it isn't the label that's important. It's the experience of it. And it's the knowing that it's there, and knowing that you can go there at any time. An hour ago, from right this minute that I'm talking right now. I was on an airplane flying into Chicago. So 40 minutes before landing at O'Hare, I just decided that I would go within. I would go inside and have this guide or this force or this knowingness, this inner spirituality. And you begin to really rely on this, you see. You begin to know that it's there and it never fails you. I went into what most people walking up and down the aisles would have thought of was a meditation. But actually I was just visualizing and picturing and working out exactly what I was going to be doing here today. Not every word and every detail and without an outline or anything like that. But I was seeing it working out and seeing myself being able to be fluent and seeing myself talking, picturing the outcome that I wanted for today. Picturing it, literally living it out in my mind or in thought before it actually is played out in form or in the physical world. All right? That is the greatest source of comfort to me for anything that I do. Anything that I do in my life. It is the greatest source to know that I can go there and have a conversation with God or with whatever you want to call it, because I'm not trying to push any particular religious point of view on anyone. This is not what it's about for me. But you need some kind of name for this like constant companion that is there with you at all times. Once you get that, you have what some people call faith. But it goes way beyond just faith, because faith just requires you to just believe it because somebody else says it, or because somebody else dictates to it, or because it's a part of some prescribed theology, or it's a part of some prescription that has been laid upon you as a part of your birth. Maybe you were born into a Muslim family, or you were born into a Buddhist family, or into a Sri Lankan family, or whatever, and you were expected to sort of follow through, and you just develop faith based upon what the accident of your birth is. Nothing like that. It's nothing like that. It's way beyond that kind of faith. It's the faith of knowing. It's the faith of having an understanding that the universe is perfect and that everything in it is happening for a reason and that there are no accidents in it, and that as you go into this magical place, you begin to discover this universe within yourself that is all-encompassing, and that allows you to create in your mind exactly the outcome that you want, and then you work from that outcome. And even as I'm sitting here right now talking in the studio, I can see myself back on the airplane an hour ago, and I can see myself now living out what it was that I was doing back then. Well, you know, in a sense, I'm doing this as a grown man, and as the father of 7 children, and you know, as a 50-year-old person, but what I'm able to do now, to consult within myself and have that faith that I'm not alone and that I can consult this and go there, is no different than what I was able to do when I was 3 and 4 and 5 years old and 18 years old. And I could, at this moment, chronicle my entire lifetime and see that I was able to, as a very young boy, play it out in my mind first. Like while the teacher was talking and trying to manipulate us into behaving well through her being upset and crying or angry or whatever it was, I knew at the time in my mind exactly what was going on. And while I was not necessarily one of the renegades creating all of the problems for her, I also knew that I wasn't going to choose to be full of anguish and pain and hurt because of something that she was saying. I just wouldn't go there. In my mind, I wouldn't go there. And so I would play it out in my mind first, and then I would tell other people about it. It's really interesting. When I talk to great athletes or great performers at any level, almost all of them have this sort of secret knowing. And so there's this enormous knowingness of faith, which is much more than just faith based upon something that's imposed upon you. It's having gone within, discovered that you have a guide with you at all times, discovering that within your mind, when you want to use it in a positive and picturesque way, that is picturesque in the sense of being able to picture what it is that you want for yourself. Once you go in there and discover this, then you start to apply it. And you start to apply it all over the place, in virtually all areas of your life. For the big meeting that you may be having, or for the sales conference, or for whatever it is that may be on the horizon for you, it becomes second nature after a while. to play it all out in thought and to ask for guidance. Not for special favors, not so that my team can win and your team will lose. Nothing like that. Like even asking the question, what am I here for? Do I have a purpose? And in what sense is what I am doing or about to embark upon commensurate with that purpose? And this is a very troublesome area for a lot of people. Because a lot of people, most people, believe in sort of the accidental notion of what they're here about. You know, it's like you're just sort of an accident of your parents, you know, dalliance 9 months before your birth. And so most people don't go within and really discover this in their lives because they don't think that the universe is on purpose. I read an interesting article this summer on the astronauts and their spiritual experiences of having gone into the universe outside of the Earth plane and looking back. And one of the astronauts was quoted as saying that when he looked back at the Earth, this blue planet, like what our sky is what you see from out there. And you look then, in one direction you see Earth and this tiny, tiny little dot, this blue dot. And then you look out the other way and you see an infinite number of worlds. And you look all around you and you're surrounded by this infinity of this universe. He said, I realized that there's an intelligence to this system, that it is an intelligent system that is all absolutely, it's like it happened for him in a moment, this instantaneous kind of realization that there's an intelligence to all of this, that the intelligence that is a part of the universe, or that is allows the universe to work. Again, the label isn't important. He said it made him realize that it's all working absolutely perfectly and that it's all on purpose and that all of it has a purpose. Well, I have discovered that most people really don't believe they have a purpose, or they spend a big hunk of their life trying to discover their purpose, or they will find so many events transpiring in their life that seem to be inconsistent with any kind of grander purpose that it's impossible for them to accept that this is anything but just one grand accident. I know it's not an accident. And once you discover your purpose, and the way that you discover that, that's that secret source. So that's the secret force, if you will, that is within you at all times. This invisible, silent, empty space that is a part of every one of us. That is what allows us to be.